This week's episode is brought to you in partnership with Zero Procure. The guys at Zero Procure have walked a mile in the shoes of many of our listeners from the world of hospitality. In fact, they have over 70 years of collective experience of working in the hospitality industry, and that'll probably be me getting into trouble for making them feel old. I really recommend speaking to them to ensure you're working with the right suppliers at the right price. There's zero cost involved. Just click on their link in the show notes or visit their site at zeroprocure.com/podcast. Welcome to Hospitality Meets with me, Phil Street, where each week we take a light-hearted look into the stories and individuals that make up the wonderful world of hospitality. Today's guest is Nassar Khalil, CEO of Rogue City Hotels and holder of one inspirational story. Coming up on today's show, Nassar makes his play to get invited back on the show.
Look, Phil, you are someone I admire and regard highly.
Phil is phenomenally vague. That's what needed to be done to get the thing done that you needed to do. And Nassar encourages us all to get comfortable with this story setup.
I'm happy that was the case because it prepared me for what happened next.
All that and so much more as Nassar talks us through his incredible story and journey to date. It's difficult to know where to start with Nassar's journey, as this is a story that has it all. He's had to overcome adversity that most of us would be grateful to never experience, but to have done the things he's done, leading to his current role at the helm of one of the UK's most innovative hotel companies, is testament to his character. There's inspiration and power for us all in his journey. Don't forget to give us a like and a subscribe wherever you consume your podcasts. Enjoy! And a huge Hospitality Meets welcome to Nassar Khalil.
Well, thank you, Phil. It's good to be with you today, as always, and thanks for having me.
You're very, very welcome. Where are you recording today?
I'm talking to you from my office in Nine Elms, next to the American Embassy and the power station that has just been relaunched recently. So you've got Apple and others moving into where I am at the moment. So it's a nice part of town with some amazing views. So yes, I'm talking to you from my office today in Battersea.
Very good. Yeah, it is a part of the world that is on the up and up, it seems.
Yes, I mean when I moved here a number of years ago now, there wasn't much really in terms of developments or offices. We secured this land way back when Battersea was not known for business as much. And we built these offices from scratch, and all around us since then, you've had all sorts of developments happening. So if I look outside of my office window on both sides, I could see developments coming up like no one's business. So yes, yeah. And obviously since then, the American Embassy was also moved to this area. So I was here before. And the power station finally got developed with a huge shopping center, apartments, a hotel.
It's quite incredible, actually, that development.
Yeah. And to top it all up, we've now got a couple of underground stations that are brand new. So you can actually now get here not only through the overground, but also through a couple of underground stations on the Northern Line.
Yeah, that's a game changer, that as well, I think, in terms of getting footfall into the area.
That's right. Yes, and it's getting better and better as I speak with you now. There are at least 5 other developments that are going up as we speak, right, all around us.
But none of them were there before you, so you basically are the pioneer of the location. That's what we're saying.
Yes, it's a fair comment. Although actually, when we built this office block, we were not thinking that things will happen the way they have. We thought at some point it will be developed, but it's just been a rapid progression of development. It's now the place to be, really, above and beyond central London.
Brilliant. Well, we've spoken about Battersea, but actually we're here to speak about you. So just tell the world what it is that you do. And I have to say, I am grateful that you're going to do this and not me, because when I was looking through your LinkedIn profile, the amount of things it seems that you have your head in is quite astounding. So I'm quite excited to understand, I suppose, how you manage your time in that process. But in any case, yeah, go ahead with telling us who you are and where you are and what you do.
Yeah, well, thank you. I'll try and keep it as best I can and as succinct as I can, because I wouldn't want to bore any of your listeners today. I'm Nassar Khalil, as you've introduced me. I'm the Chief Executive of Rogue City Hotels. I also sit on a number of hotel boards and a number of other boards, including boards of developers and the like, where I either sit as an executive or non-executive director. And above and beyond my own business, of which I'm the chief executive, I try and help a number of other businesses through my consultancy company, which employs in the region of about 50 people, advising hoteliers across the globe on anything from design to launch to branding to operational matters thereafter. And in addition to that, I currently lecture at two colleges. One is the Vatel Institute in Belgium and France, and the other is Stratford College in London, where I visit at least once a month to talk about hospitality and lecture hospitality students on the way forward and basically inspire them to think big, because I'm very passionate about the industry that has made me who I am today. So I want to give back to the leaders of tomorrow, as it were, and I do my best to do that. So yes, I'm also the director of hospitality and leisure at Henley PLC, which is a developer that also owns a hotel within its portfolio.
And when you're not busy with all of that, you're making time to record podcasts.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, Phil, you are someone I admire and regard highly. This is not something I would have just said yes to easily, but I think for what you provide and the audience that you've got, if this would inspire one or two people going forward, then I think we would have achieved something. So it's always a pleasure to do podcasts with you in particular.
Bless you. I think we probably just leave the podcast there, to be honest. It's not going to get any higher than that for me. So, no, that's great. I really appreciate that. And I absolutely appreciate you making time to chat, especially because you and I have spoken before and you've told me a little bit about your journey. And I think if anybody walks away from hearing your story and is not inspired, then I don't know what would inspire people, to be honest. So I was really excited when you said yes to come on and have this chat. And it's probably enough from me, really, on that front. And I think the question that I always kind of open with everyone is, how did you get into hospitality in the first place? But I think with you, there might be a backstory that we have to fill in ahead of that. But I'll let you be the architect of that.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll do my best to kind of go as far back as I can. Well, sometimes things do just happen. They are not preempted. They are not manufactured. And when I say sometimes, one of those instances is myself, and therefore I fit into that category. I came to the UK when I was quite young to study here as a student. I came from a fairly well-to-do family. We were not extremely rich, but my parents were very hard-working people, and they were determined to ensure that I get a good education, and nowhere better than to get me to the UK. So when I came here to study, obviously I had to go through all of the challenges of being here on my own without really much in terms of relatives or support. So I went straight to a boarding school at a very young age, a Christian boarding school, a convent for that matter, in Lewisham. So it was tough at times, but I was very fortunate to be able to go in there and make friends, as it were. We had open dorms those days, and so you have to share everything with your peers and fellow students. And although, I looked different, I was welcomed by my, colleagues or student colleagues, I should say, and I never really had any issues fitting in. I was welcomed, and it basically helped make me who I am today, because when you get into that environment, and you are new into the country, you are new into the education system, you are fairly young, your parents are far away, you have to make do with what you have. Obviously, bless my parents, they were quite worried as to whether I would settle in or not, but I managed to. Now, because I do not have much in the lines of people to visit or relatives to see at weekends, even when the boarding school would allow some of my friends to leave for certain weekends to see their relatives or parents. I actually tend to stay in the campus studying, doing something in the library,
Right.
doing assignments and the like. So that meant that for some of my friends who were leaving, I was able to help them with their homework and any other thing that they need to prepare for, making me a very popular friend indeed. And I used to get gifts on their way back from their parents, just to thank me for doing stuff for them because I had the time and I was staying behind. And yes, I was very fortunate to have a very good education in that regard.
Is this the first? Was this I suppose the first time in your life where you'd, because you're putting yourself into a situation like that, you're putting yourself into a vulnerable position, I suppose, because you don't know anyone, you don't really know the culture, you don't know whether you'll be welcomed in, which you were. Is this the first time that you kind of thought, well, hard work is going to get me to where I want to get to?
Uh, I mean, at that stage, probably not. At that stage, it was more about fitting in and more about really putting my head down and more about making my parents proud and more about striving to be independent away from the cotton wool that is provided by my parents. So
Yeah.
I wasn't kind of wrapped around any protection anymore. Even though I was young, it was more a question of, well, there you are. We believe in you. No matter your age, you're going to do well, and just please don't prove us wrong. Even though it's unspoken, that's how it felt, and I just had to put my head down. But from a young age, I was determined to do well. And I just had it in me. I was quite competitive. I didn't want to miss out. Even when I was not feeling well, I would force myself to go to classes so that no one else would learn something that I wouldn't know about and miss out when it comes to exams or tests. So I was always pushing myself. And I think that's just something I had in me.
Right. That's not something that you felt you've learned, as it were, or you just had this internal drive.
That's right. Yeah, at that age anyway,
Yeah.
I had that because I still had the comfort of if things don't work out, my parents are successful business people. I've always had the option of going back and joining them in their business. So at that particular point, I didn't feel, endangered in any way. That my only plan is to succeed in terms of education, but
Mm.
that being said, like you said, I had that drive in me and I wasn't going to accept option B. I always wanted to do and succeed in my own right. So that gave me quite a push to keep going. So
Yeah.
that was obviously secondary education. I just kept pushing myself through high school and was coming up with amazing grades, which were not because I was a genius or anything like that. It was purely because I had a lot of time. My books were my friends, mainly at weekends. I would always study, love reading, and that took me to a level that probably my friends couldn't get to because they were maybe not putting as much time as I was in my studies.
Yeah. That old what's the saying? Success is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration, or something like that. It's the hard work ethic that gets you beyond possibly where you think you can get yourself.
That's right, and that's exactly it. I don't believe in luck. I think you make your own luck. I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but I certainly have not find myself in a situation where I've been lucky. It's all about grafting, hard work all the way through,
Yeah.
and I'm happy that was the case because it prepared me for what happened next.
Yeah, well, that leads us nicely on then to the next stage of that story. What did happen next?
So yeah, I mean, I was studying. I was having the support I needed from my parents. At this point, they had a very successful export and import business in Africa. They were merchants and doing very well. And when I finished high school, I wanted to get to Imperial College to do business because obviously I've come from a business background with my parents, so it was the natural thing to do to go and study business and probably end up in the stock market, stocks and shares, and whatever else you might do when you get a business degree. But all I knew at the time was I wanted to go into serious business and make my way in life. So obviously I was fortunate because of the good grades and the sort of grades I achieved at GCSEs and A levels. So I obviously applied for Imperial College and had to take the necessary entry exams those days to get in. And yes, so I got in there, and at the time, I was very, very happy that so far I'd achieved what I wanted to achieve, and my parents were quite proud of me at that point. And they've always been, but I think they were exceptionally proud because getting into Imperial College wasn't a mean task even those days. So,
Right.
really, really happy to get in there. So, cut a long story short, as soon as I started my first year at Imperial, I was communicating with my parents constantly or regularly, I should say. When I spoke to my mother, I still recall a week before the incident I'm about to explain when she was very excited to pass by London to see me and my dad, who was retiring at the time, wrapping up the business because they've worked very hard, they've done enough, and they wanted to start enjoying life. Then I spoke with on the Sunday, and then on the Thursday, just after lectures, I got a call from my older brother who asked me to go and see him. He was in London at the time, and I was a bit confused as to why he wanted to see me because he was only here for 3 days just by coincidence. He said, just take a taxi and come and see me. Now, at that point, I'm thinking, what could happen? Why does he want to see me? I said to him, I'm tired. I've just finished lectures for the day. He said, no, 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 just please come. Come, take a black cab and come to me. So, of course, that's what I did. And I was thinking on the way to him, what could be the case here? I arrived, he was waiting for me outside of his apartment, and he just hugged me and said, you know, Dad is pretty much dead. So I looked at him and said,
Jeez.
what are you talking about? He said, yes, our dad is dead. So I thought, what? And before I could really absorb the news, he basically said, with mom. So you can just imagine at that point what was going through my head. Not only one, but now two, and I just couldn't make sense of what was happening.
Yeah. How old were you
Um,
at this point, Nassar?
I would have been about 17, almost getting to 18,
Right.
17 and two quarters maybe. Well, just before my 18th birthday,
Yeah.
So it was quite a shock. Now it took me about an hour to absorb the news I've just been told by my older brother. But when I start to receive phone calls or people coming, then I realized this is real. Now I've just spoken with them the Sunday before, so it was still not realistic in the sense that I was still daydreaming. But I then started to find out what has happened, that they got attacked, the country had a coup, and you have a faction of the army that became rebels and went to the capital and went for the wealthy people. And my parents, being one of those people, they went to their compound, attacked all of their security, gain access to the compound, their house, and then asked them to give up everything that they have, which they did happily because they were not young anymore to have a fight or an argument. They
Yeah.
they were asked to open their safe, give the keys for their cars and whatever else they had, which they said yes to. But as these people took everything they could, they just opened fire and basically shot both my parents in the process, who almost
My life.
instantly were both murdered at the same time. So we obviously had to arrange a helicopter to pick up their remains from where they were killed in their compound, and start making arrangements. At that time, the country was lawless, so it was very difficult trying to make arrangement those days. And for a 17-year-old, as it were, it was with my studies to boot and everything else. It was very difficult to make sense of it all, but sense we have to make because there was no time for anything else. So yeah, that then meant that I had to do whatever I have to do at the time to get my parents buried along with my brother. And that's what we did, and went back into education. But at this point, it dawned on me that there is no plan B anymore. My parents that I relied on are gone.
Yeah.
I know nothing about their holdings in Africa. I wasn't really plugged into that. I was a youngster. No one knows who's taken over whatever they had. So it was pretty tough at the time.
I can only imagine. Yeah, I mean, it's one thing to, have to contemplate a life going forward at quite a young age without your parents who've been your bedrock, but it's also then the next realization that it's on me now. Like there's no one else in this game of life that I can rely on apart from myself.
That's correct. And it was a huge wake up call, because until now I've been insulated to the extent that whatever I want, they got me a student apartment for myself. They were sponsoring my education. I could just pick up the phone and ask for more support. I would get it. And overnight, everything froze. So I had to downgrade from my student apartment to a hostel. I had to let go of all of my usual comforts because no money at that point was coming in anymore. So I had to pretty much find a way to survive from living a comfortable life to going into survival mode, because whatever happened, I was determined to finish my degree because that's what my parents would have wanted for me. And I wasn't going to give up, even if it meant that I was going to go hungry. I was going to do whatever I needed to do, find whatever means possible, do a part-time job, do whatever I needed to do. And that's what I did basically to survive for a number of years until I realized my degree, which was a very emotional event because, my parents were not there to hug me and congratulate me at the end of that education journey.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's wow. I mean, there's no other word really to sum it up. But I suppose the when something like that happens to you, you have to do whatever it takes, right, to move on. Otherwise, what's the choice?
Exactly. And, I like to think what I did was kind of unique, but it isn't. I think the human, instinct kind of kicks in. And when you find yourself in a situation where all of a sudden all of the pillars that you rely on for support are no longer there, you have got to find a way to suspend yourself and stay where you are without those pillars. And that's what I did. Can I pretend it was easy? No, it was pretty tough. There were days when I went hungry. There were days when I survived on a tin of sardines. There were days when I had to walk through, because my hostel those days was in Paddington and my university was in South Kensington. So I had to walk through Hyde Park to come to uni. And I did that very often because I just couldn't afford the tube ticket, the train
Right.
ticket to jump on a tube line. And these were the days when a tube ticket was no more than a few pence, but I still could not afford it because I had to save money for other bits. So I had to basically walk through the park, even at the dead of winter where you can't see much in front of you in the mornings. I had to embrace that journey because that would save me, a few pounds, which I could use to get dinner or something else. So
Right.
it was tough, but I guess the human resilience meant that I just got on with it because there was no other plan. I couldn't rely on anyone else at that point.
I was just going to ask you, actually, were there any moments, because there's probably people listening, and including myself, who I'm trying to visualize what my response would have been at that age as well. You like to think that you would do whatever it takes, but you never, excuse me, you never know until you're put into the situation what you're capable of. Were there any points whereby you thought, what am I doing? I don't know if this is the right, this is too difficult. I can't do this. I need to look at trying to do something else.
Absolutely. And there were parts of my time when I would sit in my hostel room, which hardly had any window, but actually a door into a patio in the basement, that patio of which people from above, the floors above, would throw cigarette butts and things like that, which I kept cleaning because it's literally the only area of my room that I had to fresh air and things like that. When
Mm.
I thought to myself, sitting in my bed, eating my tin of sardines or tuna or whatever it was half a slice of pizza, and just thinking, for how long can I do that? And what about if I run out of my weekly money? What will happen?
Mm.
But actually, that in a kind of ironic way kept me going because I thought, look, I am determined to get to the end of this, and whatever happens, I'm gonna make something of my life. That's what my parents, who I love and missed so much and admire hugely, would have wanted me to do. And I was just that little voice at the back of your head that just kept saying, "Go on, son, go on. You're gonna make it, regardless of the hardship right now. You
Yeah.
will you will make it." And the same thing, Phil, when I was walking through the park to come to uni, sometimes alone with no one else there, I used to just contemplate on my way, the silence, everything else, just think about, when would that time come when I would own a house, or when I would have a family, or when I would, stand on my own 2 feet and not having to worry anymore about where the next payment would come from to keep me going. So there were many times when those things kind of went through my mind.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose it's one of those periods of your life that you maybe, correct me if I'm wrong, but you look back on that time now, and maybe in the moment you don't appreciate the lessons that it's teaching you, but actually now looking back, it's probably a lot easier to see that actually that what you would have learned through that process, nobody can ever teach you. You have to experience what you experienced, and it probably gave you a set of problem solving skills that you I suppose never really even knew that you had within you.
Precisely. I That's absolutely it. And some of it you just realize as you go on. Pretty much, you face challenges. You think, how am I gonna solve this? I needed a new tube of toothpaste. Where am I gonna get it? And then you find a way, and eventually you get it before the current one runs out. And that's how it was. And yes, I dug deep into places within me, into energies that I didn't think I had.
Yeah.
But again, human resilience just meant I just have to keep going, which I did, and that took me to the end of the degree, which I managed to achieve with distinction, I must add, just because I was just too driven not to achieve that.
Mm.
Nothing was going to stop me. Hunger, transport, whatever it was, nothing
Yeah.
was going to stop me from getting there. I was just too tenacious. As I said, that little voice was just there, and I wasn't going to let my family down. Yes, so as part of achieving my degree, obviously I had to do some placement work, which As it happens, I got a placement thanks to my university securing it. I got a placement at Claridges in London.
Okay. Yeah.
Just when I was getting towards the end of my degree, and that basically was the first experience I had of hotels and hospitality.
Right.
Now,
It's not a
I
bad first experience, I have to say.
no, no, it just so happens it's Claridge's. It could have been anywhere else, but yeah. So I went there for a few months placement to do my thesis, and yeah, it was just a new world for me. Went in there, was under the wing of some well experienced hoteliers in different departments that gave me a lot of grounding. And the first thing I realized was no 2 days were the same in hospitality. It was just like every day brought its own excitement and challenges in equal measure. So, if we're not dealing with a huge problem with a leak, we are dealing with a celebrity that is arriving and has requested a certain, thing to be done in their suite.
Yeah.
Or I am dealing with the championing of investor in people, which was one of my pet projects at Claridges. So every day was an enjoying day for me, if I could put it as such. And in a way that gave me the bug, if you like. I got injected with the hospitality bug. That meant that, yeah, I studied business, not hospitality, but actually hotels are part of business. And I liked what I was experiencing. Long hours, long days, dealing with all sorts of characters. But yeah, that it did open my eyes into hotels.
Yeah, do you know that long hours thing, which obviously gets widely reported around the industry? I experienced the same thing when I was growing up in the industry as well. Is that long hours were part of it, but actually, for me, I was just really enjoying it. So the hours were kind of incidental. Like if you had to do an 18-hour day, then that's what you did because that's what needed to be done to get the thing done that you needed to do. And nobody really asked any questions because people were in roles that they really enjoyed doing. And in my case, it was a little bit different because I was on a cruise ship, so there was nothing really else to do other than work. So, but yeah, I mean, I think that's another cliche, isn't it? Around find that thing that makes you tick, and it won't ever feel like you're working.
Absolutely. And yeah, I never felt the hours. I actually was enjoying every bit of it. And yeah, long days. I mean, I remember some days I was going home at about 10:30 in the evening, waiting for the bus. But actually, it didn't feel like I'd started at 8 in the morning. It just, because you have certain things you've got to finish for that day, and some of those things cannot wait. And because you work as a team, and you enjoy the people you work with, then time just flies. And, there's nothing better for me than seeing the satisfaction on other people's faces, on others when you've achieved something that rubs onto others, whether it be guests that are arriving and they look at what you've done for them before they arrive, and you just see the happiness and satisfaction on their faces, and you thought, that's definitely worth the time. Or a colleague that you've worked with so much to help, and you get to the end of the project you were doing, and just that feeling, it's so worth it. Yeah, so I agree with you absolutely. I think hospitality is how it is. You've got to be passionate and dedicated to do that job, and effectively, it's a service. It's more of a service than really anything else. You've got to enjoy it. It's not something for everyone, but
Yeah,
if you don't mind the hours, you do very well in it.
yeah. I think the hours are also insignificant if you're surrounded by people, both upwards, downwards, sideways, whatever direction that you just click with, and that get you, and you all just feel part of the same thing, and you're all pulling in the same direction. When you've got a team like that in place, it's a really special place to be.
Absolutely, and hospitality is all about teams. I go further with my own people, and I try and create a tribe, because teams are kind of setups that everyone has come to talk about or expect or is familiar with. But I go further to say I actually create tribes within my organization. Because a team, yes, a team is great and you help each other, you work together. But there are times when, members of that team just don't have that additional kind of thought in them to go that wee extra mile, if I could say that for a colleague, whilst the tribe, the entire survival of that tribe is based on everyone working together to achieve a certain outcome, a certain goal. Because sometimes with teams, they work in silos and they just look after their corners.
Yeah.
But with a tribe, if you were to survive, you survive together. If you were to fail, you fail together. So that is the sort of ethos and culture I try and create within my organization.
Fantastic. Yeah, I really like that. And I think it's probably a testament as well to what Rogue City stands for, which I think we'll come on to as in the fullness of the journey as well, is that you're trying to do things a little bit differently. So we'll get to that in good time.
Absolutely. So basically, by getting that kind of experience, I was told by our general manager at the time, look, Nassar, you've done very well here. When you go back to get your degree, when you are all done, let me know. And I've got a job for you because you've just been exceptional in what you've done. So that was kind of a pleasant surprise for me, thinking, oh, wow, okay. Actually, I don't have to worry too much when I finish my degree. If I don't want to get into the stock market or shares, I could actually work in hotels, and I've just been offered a job. So, of course, when I got my degree, I thought this is, I love hotels and this is something I could do. So I went to Claridges to try and get in touch with my general manager at the time. This is some 8 months after my placement, just under a year, but he had moved on. He had unfortunately left. So obviously that promise that was made to me at the time, which I took for granted, was no longer a reality because the new guys there probably wasn't really familiar with me or whatever it was, and I wasn't going to rely on him to uphold the promise of his predecessors. So I thought, what do I do now? Then do I take a gap year? Do I do something else? Do I pursue business in the stock market? But actually, I decided to apply for hotel jobs, and I got my first break at Hilton Olympia, where the general manager, rather not general manager, the front of house manager at the time was going back to New Zealand. So there was an opening for a front of house manager at the time. And Hilton Olympia, I'm not sure if you're familiar, but it's what we refer to in the industry as a factory hotel. It's almost 1,000 keys, and basically between concierge and reception, you are managing a workforce the size of an entire payroll of a small hotel. So you have 25 people in reception and another 20 to 30 people in concierge. So it's almost the size of an entire workforce in a smaller hotel. And being fresh from university, being thrown into the deep end to manage two departments that were not properly managed. Everyone was doing their thing. It was really an epic challenge for me. But as you know, all through my journey so far, I've kind of just grafted, relished the challenges that I faced, and this wasn't going to faze me. So I embraced the opportunity, and in the process had to restructure the entire department from scratch. Basically, I had to let some people go. Some people had to leave because they wouldn't, comply with the strict new way of doing things going forward, which was a more structured, a more accountable way of doing things, increasing the service levels, providing guests with what they've come to expect at a Hilton. It was just becoming too detached from Hilton principles and so on. So of course, I had to learn those principles very quickly. And, within months, the department was a completely different department to what I took on, or when I took it over, what it was like. And word had spread within Hilton that there was this young chap who's just come in, and he's really done a few things that no one thought were achievable at the time. And of course, within cluster management and within regional management, I was then getting noticed. And basically, that led me to my first general manager's role within Hilton, which was at Hilton Kensington. It had just gone through a refurb, and they wanted a general manager to take it on. And what I've achieved at Hilton Olympia meant that I was naturally the one that the regional manager or GM was going to appoint. But they also kindly agreed to pay for me to do, because at that time I always wanted to do an additional degree in hospitality, because you got to remember my degree was purely in business.
Yeah.
So I wanted to add something in hospitality. So thanks to Hilton, they those days they agreed for me to do that additional degree that I wanted to do whilst managing Hilton Kensington. And obviously that's where my general management journey began in earnest. And the rest is history, really. Phil, because that took me from there. I then got headhunted a few years later to join Nikko Hotels, which is a fine company owned by Japan Airlines, JAL. And very quickly I became the head of global standards. And my job was to ensure that whether you call Nikko Dusseldorf or at the time Nikko London, which was the Montcalm Hotel in Marblearch, the standards are exactly the same wherever you go. Consistency, standard of service, everything is the way you would expect it to be. And when you work with Japanese people, there was no room for any kind of complacency or errors, or everything needed to be precise. Part of that meant I had to work in Japan for 6 months to get all of the grounding that I needed to ensure that I could deploy the vision and standards the way they were expecting them to be, from white gloves to checking corners to ensuring that the right ties is used on the right day of the week. You've got ties for odd days and ties for even days, that sort of thing. So the person I was shadowing at the Landmark Tower in Yokohama actually was quite a senior member of Nikko. But every time I would go with him to a meeting, if we were passing through a lobby or any kind of space within the hotel, got to remember this hotel is in a tower that was spanning about 50 stories and more. We would stop regardless to basically fix whatever it is that he's noticed that wasn't right, whether a lampshade was a bit, skewed, or he's just noticed some bit of draping or curtains that are not aligned. We would stop to fix that. He had his white gloves, he had his leveling ruler, he had everything to make sure everything is just as precise as it can be. You had to send people home if they don't know what day it was of the week or what date it was of the month. So obviously that gave me a lot of insight into attention to detail, into high standards, into not accepting second best. And yeah, that then took me into different realms of standards. I ended up joining the the boutique trend in London, which saw the Sandersons, the Hempel, and the likes, which were a new breed of hotels that were coming up. And people just wanted the best in the industry to have those hotels launched. And yeah, that took me to a different level of involvement into hotels. I had to get involved with funding. I had to get involved with business planning, not just manage the hotel. I had to get involved with project management, design, until I then met with the owners of what is now called the Resident Hotel Group. But those days when we started, it was called Base to Stay Hotels.
Okay.
It's gone through a few rebrand. It then was then known as Nadla Hotels, and then it became the Resident Group now. Now, when I got headhunted for that, I'd won a number of awards in the kind of boutique hotel space. So they were looking for someone really good to join them. They were not hospitality people. Western Heritable, the hedge fund or private equity firm, I should say, that owns that business, or majority of the shares of that business, is actually a property company in central London. So they hadn't done hotels. When I was approached, they had an idea of doing some sort of high-end student accommodation to diversify that portfolio of office development. But by the time I finished my discussion with them, within 2 or 3 presentations, at this point, I'm already looking at, or looking after, I should say, a cluster of boutique hotels in London. So when they approached me with the first one, I thought, well, if it's going to be student accommodation, I wasn't really that interested, because I was at the height of my career. I wasn't going to go into, even with the offer of shares and whatever it was. But I came up with a concept that satisfied what they wanted to do, because they were not really that keen on F&B, and they didn't want to have a lot of restaurants and bars in their hotels. They just want to focus on the common commodity, which is the bedroom, and make it as good as it can be. So I went back and devised some sort of concept that satisfied what they wanted, but also we would effectively end up with a hotel company rather than some sort of student accommodation business.
Yeah.
Having presented to them alongside with a few other shareholders that were quite successful barristers and the like, they, Sir John McTaggart, who was the chairman at the time of Western Heritable, shook my hand and said, look, welcome on board. We'll become partners, and let's see this journey through. And obviously that started my journey with Base to Stay Hotels, which then became Nadla after I sold out at the end of 2011. It was my baby. It was hard to let go. It was something I'd worked very hard to establish, but go I did. I had an opportunity to move on to work for the royal family of Qatar.
Well, that's quite a topical place to discuss. But
I know, very timely. I'm not sure whether this is a good thing or bad thing, but you've known me as being frank, so I have to be, and we're not going to leave anything out of this. This is actually the first detailed interview I've ever done on myself, so I might as well give you the full story. So I got approached by a very well-known company in the UK that said that there is a huge hotel being developed in Doha in Qatar to kind of rival the likes of the Burj Al Arab in Dubai, because Qatar, as everyone now knows, wants to be on the map. It's a small country, but they want to hit above their weight, and they want to make sure that they are well known. And they've been blessed with a lot of gas and oil, so they've got disposable money that they could use and achieve whatever they wanted to achieve. So the company that approached me is not a recruitment company, it's an advisory firm that came to me and said, these guys want the best in the business to go and launch their 7-star property downtown Doha, because this is owned by the Qatari government, and it basically is going to be their flagship destination property for heads of states, for delegates of the United Nations, for Qatar Foundation visitors, for all sorts of dignitaries that would be coming to Qatar from time to time. And I was to go as the chief operating officer. Obviously, at the time, I had to think very carefully as to whether it's a good kind of direction for me to take in a country I've not operated in before, knew very little about. But just as with every other challenge we've talked about, I decided that it's now or never, really. So
Plus, it sounds like a really, really interesting project.
It was. It absolutely was. It was in the final stages of being built. I had not much input with regards to the design of it because that had been going on, but they are getting to the point where they now need a well-renowned operator to come and set up everything that needed to be set up before it get launched. And they couldn't find anyone better, according to them, than myself. And of course, I embraced that opportunity, flew to Qatar, had some very high profile meetings with ministers and the like. And, they wanted to remind me of the significance of this property and what it means to, the kingdom of Qatar. And yeah, I took on the challenge. I ended up launching a hotel that had a reception on every floor, a butler for every suite, some 8 restaurants, 5 clubs, and it's
Wow,
basically a
yeah.
village within a city. And yeah, that was successfully done. Took over from the contractor, did all the snagging, set up all the systems. By the time I finished with it, I had some 900 employees from 25, 26 different countries
Wow, yeah.
directly and indirectly reporting to me. So that was a one-off project that I really cherished a lot and look back and said I probably will never do something like that again. So I was pleased I did it.
But that's the thing about the projects like that. Like if you look at Burj Al Arab, people, I think it was the world's first £1 billion hotel in terms of how much it cost to actually develop and and plan and all of the things that they needed to do to get into place to actually bring it to life. And then I remember at the time somebody said something like that can never be done again because it's just such a monumental monetary undertaking, but there's always somebody with more money and big vision, right? So that's like somebody's
Of
done that
course,
before. We're going to do something a bit better.
absolutely. And I'm sure it's not secret for people like me who are, well known in the industry and well connected to tell you that the Burj Al Arab is actually losing money. It's not making money.
Right.
Given what was spent in that hotel and what you can reasonably charge, if you go back to the total spend versus what the hotel is making, it is not where it should be. Now, the reason why I'm saying that is very simple. These projects are not business ventures per se. They are flagship properties to signify, a country or the status of a particular city. And of course, like you said, when Dubai offered the Burj Al Arab, Qatar had to offer something
Yeah.
even more, even more bigger to say, no, we're not going to be left behind. Qatar needs to be known, just as, now they are very happy to be known as the first Arab state to host the World Cup. However, that was achieved, that secondary for them.
Yeah.
It's more like we've achieved this. It's basically a one-off where the first people to do it will go in history for that, and we will put on good games regardless of everything else around. And whatever we think of them, good on them, because at least the games are being managed well. Now, I don't want to get into whether I agree or don't agree with some of what been said. I think some of it is absolutely factual and true, but equally, we have to look at football for now and try and enjoy the football, and then we can visit those questions later. But
Yeah.
going back to me, after 2 years of being there, 2.5 years, I wanted to come back home. I wanted to be back here with family and make sure that I develop my own business, because again, that drive was in me. Having sold out of Nadla hotels, I was in a position to start something of my own. And effectively, when I spoke to the royal family there, the prime minister, to say, I'm thinking of coming back home to England or the UK, he wasn't buying any of it. He thought, look, look, Nassar, you're doing a great job. You're managing the whole thing for us. Why? You can go back to the UK anytime you want to go. What do you want us to do? We can bring whoever you want us to bring over. I said, it's not really the point. I just felt that I've done my bit and I've launched it successfully. I can put people in charge here and I can advise you from the UK. So anyway, after some pulling and pushing time and again, and I'd made up my mind purely not because of anything. I was really well looked after. I probably, couldn't have asked for better the way I was well looked after, but I had to just come back. I was missing home.
Yep.
After the number of years I was done, I thought my job was done. The place is running well. All departments are well oiled and function like a cog within a machine. So I came back, and that's when I launched Nassar Khalil and Associates, which is my consultancy company. Because I've been well known in the industry, I was head of the West London General Managers Association. I'd done a lot of funding with banks. I was able to leverage those relationships to start working with banking groups, to start working with, other hoteliers that needed support and help in their businesses. And so very quickly, my consultancy went from one person, i.e. me, doing the work, to employing a number of people, both in terms of on payroll and some consultants that were assisting me in different projects. And under that consultancy, I'd done a lot of work in Dubai. I'd done a lot of work in other countries in Europe. I'd done a lot of advisory work for banks in the UK and hotel companies in the UK. And so that has been very successful. And whilst I'm doing that and working a lot with charities and everything else, I met with chairman and CEO of Henley PLC, which is a developer. And through that relationship, he tempted me to kind of go into a partnership with him to start a hotel business. I was very happy with what I was doing. I wanted to obviously retain that consultancy business, which obviously as a partner in my new business, that doesn't stop me from doing the consultancy work that I do for all of my clients, both abroad and here. And that work continues. But at the same time, I decided to go back into hotel portfolio, and that's how I founded Rogue City Hotels. Now, it's my company, it's my business. We're now at our fifth property, many of which are, by the way, under construction. But the idea is that I would get to some 20, 25 properties in the next 10 years. That's my goal. And Henley, as a partner, their job is purely to work with me on the development side. So I would identify an opportunity, whether be it a car park, a plot, an office block, whatever it is. I will acquire it if it suits my needs. Henley will then be my construction partners, would go in, deliver the conversion in line with what my vision is and what my design brief is. And they will pass it on back to me once it's all developed. And then my team manages it.
Yeah.
And we've been very aggressive in our acquisition plan. I started this just before COVID, a few years before COVID. So
well done. Yep.
Yeah, we basically get kind of slowed down a bit during COVID because my lenders were not doing much of lending at the time in terms of bank funds. But I was probably one of the few to secure funds even during COVID, so that as soon as the lockdown was over, we could get onto the construction side of the project, which we're now doing in addition to the operating hotels that we have. I've secured a property in Kensington in London. We've got almost at the final quarter of refurb works in Cambridge and Glasgow. We have an operating hotel in the Highlands, and we're about to start construction in Perth in Scotland when we finish with Glasgow. And we're working on a couple of opportunities in both Edinburgh and Oxford.
Fantastic, yeah. And Perth is my old stomping ground. That's where I was born and bred. And actually what you're doing there, I don't really remember too much. I was only a child when I was in Perth, but it sounds like you've identified, and that's just one market, you've identified an opportunity in a place that needs that opportunity.
Yeah, that's right. We've acquired the old council offices at the High Street, 125 High Street, and that's going to be the first five-star hotel in the city of Perth. So literally so far, and I appreciate you were young when you were there. You probably maybe don't know all the developments that have taken place since. But even now, although Perth has seen a lot of regeneration, they've not managed to create high-end hotels there. So you still have the likes of Premier Inn, Travel Lodge, and obviously the city needs a lot of new companies to come in, a lot of new investment, private investment. And for that to happen, people need quality accommodation of where they would stay, whether it be for a few nights or for a few weeks. And what we're trying to provide in Perth is the first high-end boutique hotel that would cater for delegates that will come to the city that wouldn't necessarily want to stay in a Travel Lodge or Premier Inn.
Yeah, and what I really love about your acquisition model as well is that you're not just taking on old hotels and revamping them and going again. I'm sure that might fit part of your model, but the ones that you've got in motion at the moment, they're interesting buildings, and they've got their own history and their own story that's away from actually hospitality, but actually you can totally bring into the world of hospitality.
That's right, and that's really important for me. I mean, every soulless hotel out there would just be a hotel, but I want my hotels to be not just another soulless building in a street somewhere in a city. I want the hotel to have something to give above and beyond a bed and above and beyond, what you've come to expect in a standard hotel. And part of that is to really go through a very scrupulous identification process of which buildings work for my concept, which buildings will tell their own story, how we can merge the history of the building with what we are proposing in terms of service, in terms of guest journey, in terms of experience. And I think you're absolutely right to pick that up. I mean, in each of my buildings, even the one in Kensington in London, has a history behind it. It has a story to tell on its own. This is why, for example, all of our hotels come with names that pay tribute to the history of the building. So, for example, the building we bought in Cambridge used to be owned by someone that was regarded as the father of Cambridge, Thomas Hobson, who did all of the waterworks in Cambridge, who was one of the first business people. So I'm not sure, you probably are familiar with the phrase Hobson's choice.
Yeah,
Hobson's choice came from that building, literally. So
right.
Thomas Hobson, who built that building, now it's gone through a few lives since. It was then a police station and a fire station, and and we're celebrating all of that. You had the constable's office, which is now going to be, an amazing meeting space with paneling that goes back to the 18th century. So if you're in that room, you'd actually experience what the head of the constable's office used to experience.
Wow,
And we've
fantastic.
kept some of the cells that were to the back and celebrated those spaces. But yeah, going back very briefly to Hobson's choice. So Thomas Hobson, one of his businesses at the time was renting out horses for people. Those days there were no cars, so if you want to move some sort of load that you've got, you would come and hire a horse with a carriage to pull your load from one end to the other.
Right.
And Thomas Hobson was very clear that you cannot choose which horse you would get from that building. You would come in to hire a horse, and the one that is most rested is the horse that you would get. So it's Hobson's choice, meaning that it's a choice, but not a choice.
Ah,
You literally have to take the horse that they would give you. You cannot say, I want that brown one because it's a bit higher or it looks more well groomed. It's the one you get, the one that you get when you go to hire a horse. So
yeah.
that's the choice. So of course, as a result of that, we are actually calling our boutique hotel up the Hobson. Hobson coming from Thomas Hobson, obviously. And we just want to make sure the history of the building is well kept, well maintained. And if you go in there and just see from stained glass windows to kind of the very special details in the ceilings that we've managed to rescue and secure, it will give you a lot about the building. The same goes for Glasgow. Obviously, the same would go for Perth, same would go for London. Donalister Hotel in the Highlands used to be a hunting lodge that we've kept that way, even though we've spent few £1 million to make it as 5 stars it can be.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's and we've only known each other a very short time in the grand scheme of things, but I think what you guys are doing is really, really interesting, and I for one absolutely wish you all the very best with the project. It sounds like you have a very aggressive future ahead of you, and I mean that in a nice way, not an aggressive, horrible way. And I'll definitely be keeping a very close eye on what happens next.
Phil, that's very, very kind. I mean, having the support of people like you, who are known in the industry for what you do, kind of adds to the impetus that I feed from, the positivity and the support I get from people like you.
Bless you.
Just it means a lot. And being the CEO of another startup company, I still regard it as a startup, even though it's been going on for a few years. It can sometimes be a lonely place, and it's always nice to get some good feedback on what you're doing, because otherwise, you are looking at it from your own prism. You have to look at these things from what other people think of what you're doing. And for me, that's very important. So I hope I haven't done a disservice to bring my journey right up to date to, where I now sit as the CEO of a number of businesses, and also, still sitting on the board of a few hotel groups, and through my consultancy, also advising a number of businesses both abroad and here, all in the hospitality space, and still hopefully continue to find time to do my lectures at the institutes that I work with, to inspire those students as much as I can on a monthly basis when I can find time. And it's important for me, so I try and fit it into my schedule. And finally, not forgetting the bit I do for charity, which is also very, very important for me. I'm a trustee of a few charities, and they hold really a very special place in my heart. And above and beyond everything else I do, one of the things that gives me the most satisfaction is giving back to the community and helping others get where I got to, so that everyone can make a success of their life.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's you've hit the nail on the head, right? I mean, any one of us who are in a position of privilege, and I don't mean that in terms of it's been gifted to, but we've worked into a position that allows us the opportunity to give back. I think we're duty bound to do just that, and we're all responsible to each other to keep each other elevated and to keep each other in a place of positivity to ensure that everybody can do their best work. I think it's a very simple ethos, but if more people believed in that, I believe we would get a lot more good work done.
I agree, and I share all of that, Phil. I think you've just summarized it pretty well. I will continue to do what I do and try and make myself accessible as much as possible, whether be it through, partnerships and doing my bit to contribute in whatever way I can to support the industry. I'll continue to do that because I'm passionate about this industry, and I want it to really succeed in as much as we can succeed, and where we can, we are pushing the government to, appoint a minister for hospitality. We haven't got there yet. As the government keep changing its colors time and again. But I think hospitality businesses need a lot of support right now with the uncertainty in the market. So hopefully we'll get somewhere whereby the government will realize at some point, through a bit of pressure from different people, myself included, where I can, put influence to ensure that we finally get someone to represent the industry, because currently we've just been left on our own, whether be it on the labor side of things, where businesses are just struggling to find people, myself included. I've got so many vacancies and just cannot find the workforce to service those vacancies. And I do not recognize this bit about, just train people, because there are no people to train. No one is applying for this
Yeah.
role. So
That comment the other day really made me realise, if I didn't already know, that they're totally disconnected from reality, really. I mean, without wanting to be too controversial, but
yeah,
and that just puts pay to exactly what you've just said around, we need a proper seat at the table. We need somebody who really understands it's one thing to say, that there are however many people there are out of work in the UK, but it's another thing to get them motivated to actually want to go to work. That's where the gap is.
absolutely. And I tell you for certain, through kind of the work that I do, that if something isn't done and quick, I fear that some of our colleagues who are in the same business as I am would not survive, just because, this is just coming from both ends. So
Yeah.
you've got the cost of living, you've got the inflation, taking their margins away. And on top of that, they cannot have their hotels fully occupied because they just don't have the resources that they need to service those guests. And it's the perfect storm. I think currently what the government is doing is closing its eyes into the problem and thinking that, well, in time, if we just say the same thing again and again and we believe in what we are saying, then the problem would resolve itself. It ain't gonna resolve itself. And unless something happens, then I cannot see how we would get out of this vicious circle. If it's not prices going up, it's guests not willing to spend what you need them to spend to come and stay in your hotel, because you need to raise those revenues to service the inflation. And at the same time, you don't even have the people that you need to get all of that revenue you need. So it's like a washing machine. When you look at one area, then the next area kind of comes up.
Yeah.
So I'll continue to fight, not just for myself, but for everyone in the industry, to find a way to get the government to understand we're not asking for too much. We're asking for, like you said, a seat on the table so that we can be represented and can be heard, because we play a significant role in the economy of this country.
A
And
monumental role, yeah. And that's the thing that I haven't been able to correlate it in my head, how they can be so dismissive when it has such a positive impact. But yeah.
That's right. Sorry, I know we've gone above and beyond, but I thought I'm so passionate about these things. I thought at every opportunity, I just need to remind listeners that we need all the help we can get from government.
Yeah, and and I think that beyond that as well, then it's just down to us as businesses that stand alone and together to ensure that we're creating environments that are great for people to come and work. I think, as long as we continue to do that, then we will win eventually. But we need a leg up to help us get more people to come in and work.
That's right. Yeah, no, I agree. I think you and I are exactly on the same page.
Great stuff. I'm eminently conscious of time, but I
No
massively
problem.
appreciate you being so open with your story today, and I really, really can't thank you enough for that, the vulnerability of your story, and how an important part that played in who you've become today. Final question for you before I let you get on your way: what would be your top 3 reasons for somebody to come and join hospitality as a career?
I think I touched on this a bit earlier, but I'll do that again. Part of the reason why I've agreed to tell my story is to inspire people to say that, if I can get there, anyone can get there. It's just hard work. But actually, in answer to your question, 3 reasons for hospitality to me very simply, the satisfaction you get for the work you do, it really is a rewarding job. When you do a good job, you instantly get gratification from the satisfaction you get from other people. You do not need to have a special qualification to climb up the ladder in hospitality. You can be anyone and become one of the best managers if the right support and training is given to you. And the final reason for me why you should work in hospitality is because it's a fantastic family that you would always find yourself, a supportive group of people that will never leave you behind. If you find yourself in the right company, whatever is the situation, you would always have someone to hold your hand. So when you kind of combine these three things, you really should. And of course, in time, it's also quite rewarding in terms of monetary reward. But obviously, it's not the first reason people come into hospitality. I think you come in for your passion to make a difference. And I think though, for me anyway, I know it's subjective, but for me, those will be some of the best reasons why you should. And when I do my lectures, I always remind people of where they could end up with and how they could become some of the best leaders in the world in their field in hospitality. You don't even need a specific kind of education to get there. As long as you are hardworking, you are, someone who is a grafter and you pick up things quickly, you make your way very, very, very rapidly.
Hear, hear. Yes, I could not agree with you more. Excellent. Yeah, well, if people want to get a hold of you to learn about you a little bit more, or Rogue City, or any of the other works that you're doing, what is the best method for them to reach out to you?
I'm pretty accessible. All of my interviews are online, but yeah, roguecityhotels.com is the website for my portfolio of properties that are coming up. Obviously, they could also reach me through my office at any time here by emailing my office, and all of those details are on the website. And, we welcome good talent. We are a company that wants to, welcome people from all sorts of backgrounds and, come and work with us, come and be part of this growing team. And, whatever we can do, we'll do to support you to get you there. Nothing gives me more satisfaction than, helping people to get to the top of their potential.
Fantastic. Well, that's a wonderfully positive way to end it. And thank you again for your time. It's been an absolute joy to chat to you today.
Likewise, Phil, and thanks for having me. And I'll see you sometime soon.
Very, very good. Thanks very much.
Take good care.
Cheers.
Bye now. Bye-bye.
And there we have it. I can't tell you what a pleasure it is to get time with people like Nassar. His knowledge and passion for hospitality is just wonderful. And I hope you've taken some inspiration from his journey so far. I'll be back again next week with more stories from hospitality, but until then, thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you next week.